We all thought that we might have to wait until 2027, 2028 until we could get disappointed by the next Elder Scrolls entry, but that may no longer be true because according to a rumour, we might be getting a remake of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Apparently that may actually happen in January of next year, so like a month away. Now, to be fair, just to point it out, the source behind this rumour, little bit sketchy. It was a YouTube video, but still fun, I think, to talk about. At least if it doesn't happen, we'll know about that quickly. It's not going to get dragged out. And I do think there's a chance this could happen because I've always found it weird that Microsoft bought up Bethesda, they buy up all these studios, and they've just allowed them to continue to waste their IPs, essentially. It's, what, like 15 years nearly since Skyrim came out, and Elder Scrolls is just sitting there outside of the MMO and some weird failed card game, I think. Was there Blades, some mobile game as well? They haven't done much with the IP, and for Microsoft to spend billions and do nothing always seemed odd. So it would make sense that behind the scenes, maybe even after Starfield flopped, at least with player numbers, it looked like it didn't move any Game Pass subscriptions, so Microsoft made no money off it, it seems like. Maybe that was the end for Todd Howard, to have that control, have his tentacles all over Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and so on, and shut everyone out, including Obsidian. Seems like they weren't allowed to make another Fallout spin-off. They were very protective of their IPs, while being incompetent themselves. So it was like, come on, you're not doing anything decent with the IPs anyway, let someone else have a go. So it seems like Microsoft may finally be making that happen. I think this remake could be something that's true. If it's not, I'm sure they'll at the very least be remasters of Oblivion, maybe Fallout 3, I've seen rumors around that. But if we take this remake as actually happening, the rumor suggests it will be announced in 2025. Again, some YouTube leaker or something who says that. Speculates it could be revealed at the Xbox Direct, which has been rumored separately as happening in January. So that will almost certainly happen. It's just a question of if we get Oblivion or not. According to previous rumors, the game is being developed by Virtuos Studio and will use Unreal Engine 5. Arriving on PC and the latest gen consoles. To be honest, that's the most interesting thing about the rumor for me, because when they call it a remake, it's like, are they just calling what basically is a remaster, but maybe with some bells and whistles, a remake, and that's really it? It's pretty much the same game, it just looks a bit prettier, which would be kind of pointless, because apparently we are getting Skyblivion in not too long, which is the mod, which basically, as the name suggests, turns Skyrim into Oblivion. Same engine and everything. One of those mods which you never know if it's actually going to release. Like, you hear about it a decade ago, you get excited, and then just seems to never get into our hands. There's a million mods like that. It's just how it is when fans are trying to do it, coordinate everything, a million volunteers getting into it. It just takes forever. But apparently, that is coming out soon. So it's almost going to be competing with this remake, you would think, if the remake is real. But the reason I really find this interesting is if Unreal Engine 5 is being used, that is really going to have to be making a new game from scratch, essentially. Like, that is a full-on remake from the ground up, because what we've always been told, at least by Bethesda, whether it's true or not, I'm not a developer, I don't know how it all works, but Todd Howard has basically said there's no way they could make games like they do them, like Fallout, Skyrim, whatever, just being able to pick up, like, any item that you see, all these little Bethesda-y things that we get that are unique to their games. He has said that they just wouldn't be possible without using their Gamebryo engine, that they now call the Creation Engine or whatever. But those things are unique to the engine. So if it's now Unreal Engine 5, how much is the game going to change? Is Todd going to be proven to be full of shit? Are you going to be able to do all the same things in this remake? We'll see. I mean, the people supposedly developing at Virtuos Studio, if you had any confidence behind the remake, when you read their development history, you probably lose any of that confidence, because they're basically a port studio. Their Wikipedia entry doesn't even list their games in release order. which is unusual. It's normally year by year, but like you go down the bottom here and it lists a PSP port of Crash Mind Over Mutant, and then a couple of entries later, they did some work on Cyberpunk. They actually were responsible for the latest patch. I think CD Projekt Red have hired them to keep patching the game or something. So it's a disorganized Wikipedia entry, which just tells me they're not really a serious developer making their own games. They just do ports, it sounds like. They help with a bit of extra work. So how could they go from that port work to remaking a game from the supposedly beloved Elder Scrolls series? We'll see how long it's beloved for once Elder Scrolls 6 comes out and things take a bit of a dark turn. But that's probably the sketchy thing here. Because if it's Unreal Engine 5, it's got to be a new game from the ground up, basically. It's pretty much starting again. You can't just put the old 2006 Oblivion into a brand new engine, I wouldn't think. So that'd be interesting. Now, a lot of the feedback to this rumor, many people are frustrated. Why are you remaking Oblivion and not what some people consider to be the best Elder Scrolls game and probably the one that's aged the most, at least visually, being Morrowind? Why wouldn't you remake that? I actually think it's fair. I'm glad they're not touching Morrowind, potentially, because Morrowind actually is like a full-fledged CRPG. It's not like Oblivion and Skyrim, which are more action RPGs. And it is the reason why more modern fans, when they go back to Morrowind, they get frustrated because they get their sword in their hand and they're whacking against a crab and nothing's happening. And you whack, 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 whack. Nothing happens. Occasionally you do some damage and it goes on. And some people go, this is really clunky. How was it this bad in 2002 or whenever it came out? But it's because dice rolls are happening behind the scenes. So when you are a weakling, you keep rolling bad. You're not rolling a 6. You're rolling the wrong number. And then as you level up your skills, as you do in the later Elder Scrolls games, then you get better. You hit things more often. It's all dice rolls. It's all quite old school. Whereas in Oblivion, for instance, it's action combat, essentially. It works a bit differently. So I'd prefer they left Morrowind alone, because I don't think anyone would green light a full-fledged graphic remake and everything, and it still uses dice rolls. They'd probably convert it into an action RPG. I think it would lose a lot of its charm. It just wouldn't be the same game anymore. Whereas Oblivion, I think there's something to work with. I do think that the quests, for instance, some of the guilds, for instance, the Dark Brotherhood, the Thieves Guild and so on, they have actually some of the best quest lines in any Bethesda game. They're actually quite decent. The problem is, it's just the rest of the game kind of sucks. Like, the systems are awful. I think even just the world itself, it's a bit samey. There was a rumor that Morrowind was really interesting, the Elder Scrolls lore. It's not just sort of Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien, sword and sorcery. It is a bit unique. There's a lot of cool visuals and styles that go on in Morrowind in the earlier Elder Scrolls games, but they kind of ditched all that in Oblivion, and it feels kind of generic fantasy. And there's a rumor that Todd Howard got into the Lord of the Rings around that time, and he just copied that and put it in Oblivion and fuck all the old lore and so on. So maybe that's true, I don't know, but the key thing is there's a lot that you could change in Oblivion, certainly not just in terms of style, but it has one of the worst leveling systems in any RPG. In fact, it kind of ruins the game if you know how it works. It's actually better if you just don't think about it. You don't look into it whatsoever and you just play, like most of us would have back in 2006. It's better just to have a go, don't look in too deep, because there's a level scaling system with enemies where each time you level, enemies get stronger. So at the very start of the game, you might see a cave that in the beginning of the game is full of weak enemies. However, if you, say, level up, you run around the rest of the game, you come back to that cave, suddenly it's got enemies in like the strongest armor that is possible, and that goes across the game. Now, a lot of games have level scaling, but in Oblivion, it gets so bad that the more you level up, the more, no matter what equipment you have and so on, the more you struggle with enemies. So you basically get punished for leveling up. And there's many people who don't bother leveling up at all, or you have to use a min-maxing system, which basically tells you don't level up skills that you're actually wanting to use. Level up skills that you don't plan on using. There's a little bit more to it, But it just makes no sense. It's like, if you want to play the game the way you want, you're just going to get punished for it. That's how it works. So if you're doing a remake, scrap that. Just traditional leveling. I know the Elder Scrolls unique leveling system, some people like it. I honestly think the 3D Fallouts have a better leveling system than most of the Elder Scrolls games. Like XP for killing enemies, let's just do that. It feels more rewarding. They probably won't do it, but even just Skyrim leveling or something is going to be better than Oblivion. Also, the exploration. I do think in some ways, this will be unpopular. A lot of people are nostalgic about Oblivion, but I do think that in some ways, Oblivion is like the Starfield of the Elder Scrolls, and that's when it comes to exploration especially, because it's got the most boring dungeon crawling. Going to caves, catacombs, whatever they are, there's like 4 or 5 different templates of dungeon crawling. Like there's very little variety. And the dungeons just feel repetitive, and they're tedious sometimes. They're a little maze-like, but they don't really have any puzzles. Even some of the dumbed-down puzzles in Skyrim, they're way more interesting. Oblivion just becomes a chore. And the way I play Elder Scrolls games, I think it's different for everyone. I think that the way you play Elder Scrolls tells a lot about who you are as a gamer and how you play games and what games you probably are going to enjoy. Some people play Elder Scrolls, they just make their own fun. They want to pick up every cheese wheel and put them in their house. That's how they play. Or they want to level up every skill, try every new thing, and they're smithing, and they're fishing, alchemy, and they're just trying all different things. Some people are like me, and play it probably in the most boring possible way, which is I almost see the Elder Scrolls as a dungeon crawler, and I just want to explore and do every piece of content on the map. In the later games, unlike Morrowind, where you actually had to explore and open your eyes, you couldn't just follow a mini-map. When I play the later games like Oblivion and so on, I look on the map and I go to every possible location. I'll explore every town, collect the quests, and I'll just go and do each thing one by one, finish the quest lines, and once I'm done all the content, that's kind of it. That's how I play, and I pick up things I think are useful, like potions and gold and whatever, but I just play them like a standard RPG. Like I would play The Witcher 3 or Baldur's Gate 3, where I'm just doing the quests and so on. Some people probably think that's crazy, because, you can make your own fun in these games, all these different things to do. That's not me, though. I just play them standard RPG. And playing Oblivion, it's the most boring for that, because the dungeon crawling is just so samey and so repetitive. So maybe if there's a remake, they can revamp some of that. The point is, I don't think Oblivion is a perfect game by any means. I think if they keep the quests pretty much how they are, I think there's some times in the game where you'll do something or talk to someone, and then there'll be a bit of text on the screen, and the text reads almost like a book, where it will explain something that has happened. Like, it'll say, you went and did this, and then something occurred, and then you ran away from the bad enemies or something, and it's like, couldn't I play that? Why aren't I playing that? Why am I reading this? Like, we're not playing a text adventure or something. Like, isn't this the point of having the big sprawling world? It describes you doing things and making decisions sometimes instead of the player doing them. It just says them on the screen. So maybe they could get rid of some of that and you're a bit more involved in things. And maybe you make more choices. Not a lot of choice-making, decision-making in Oblivion. So there's room for improvement, but I'm going to say this, like, I'm just making up a fantasy in my mind about what will actually happen. I don't think any of that will really happen, because you've hired, if the rumour is true, a port studio to potentially remake the game in Unreal Engine 5. You're announcing it in a month. How long has this been in development? I doubt it's been that long. I doubt they just immediately got the studio onto it when Microsoft bought Bethesda. So who really knows? Like, this could be an absolute disaster. Given Bethesda themselves can't even make a decent game anymore using their original engine, which they're supposedly experts with, you give a new team who's done barely anything an engine that is known for a lot of tech issues, or at least developers don't seem to be using it properly, so it just happens to result in tech issues for a lot of recently released games. How are you going to make the sprawling world of Oblivion and you're able to pick up every possible item? How are you going to do that without watering absolutely everything down? If this is real, I have almost no expectations, despite all those theories in my mind, which just won't happen. That's totally unrealistic, that they'll fix the game and do all this. It's just weird, but I think it'll be interesting, because if it actually gets announced, there'll be a lot to speculate about. I think that'll be quite fun. And given the Elder Scrolls, again, it's basically a dead series for the next 4 or 5 years if you don't really care about the overpriced rip-off MMO with an expansion every year that costs full price, and apparently there's like 3 or 4 hours content. If you don't care about that, this could be the only thing to talk about when it comes to the Elder Scrolls for some time. So we'll see if it's real, we'll see if it's announced. If it doesn't, another fake rumor, can you believe it? But we'll see. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.